Forum. And could we get a motion for the meeting of the minutes of the meeting of October 10th?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Are there any additions, corrections? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Items for consideration, beginning with P1, Ordinance 90-0-11, amending certain portions of Title IV, Chapter 12 of the Evanston City Code sign regulations. The Sign Review and Appeals Board and staff recommend approval of Ordinance 90-0-11 that amends the sign regulations to improve administration. The sign regulations were created in 1987 and amended in 2003. It's been moved and second. Are there any questions, comments? Alderman Fisk?
I just had a question for maybe Melissa is the right person. What the opposition to blade signs were way back when?
This was adopted before I was on the council.
Okay.
So I think that my understanding over time was that blade signs were, from what I've heard, maybe Alderman Rainey might remember,
Yeah.
was that they were, I think they were deemed sort of out of date and not attractive. But we have a few blade signs in the city, and we actually had to have a modification in order to have the blade sign for the Century Theater.
Alderman Rainey?
I don't remember, but I sure do like the Century Theater blade sign, so I support this.
Blade sign at Turin looks very nice.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other comments, concerns? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, P2. Oh, Alderman Rainey.
I didn't want to blend this in with the discussion on, Mr. Helen, don't leave, on that, but I would really appreciate it if some of the sign experts in this community, including Mr. Helen, would take a stroll down Howard Street and see how outrageous the windows and the signage is in that strip. We're concerned about a blade sign over, an interesting store, yet it's all right for people to plaster their windows with out-of-date, paper signs, handwritten signs. It absolutely is disgusting, and I think there needs to be a way to rein that in. When we have a discussion with the people about the Office Depot, I sat there thinking, I just wish that were my problem. How can I feel concerned about a beautiful, expensive sign that might be a little too big or a little too small or a little too bright when I have to look at the horrible, horrible visuals on Howard Street? And, I mean, some people actually paper their windows with pegboard. That's got to be against the rules. I don't see how it's any different than a sign. And so I'm gonna file a complaint right now publicly about signage up and down Howard Street, and I would appreciate some sign inspector taking a look and following up.
I'm going to ask Mr. Griffin to respond because I think maybe we're going to be discussing this at economic development.
And we'll do that. As she's requested, in the next 2 to 4 weeks, we'll have a full report on compliance, non-compliance, what some of the trend issues are, and maybe even some suggestions for you if we do need to work on some ordinance amendments.
And also,
I know what you're saying about window signs.
right,
Become
right.
And a reference also to, I think maybe AMPW, that metal collapsible burglar grates be outlawed in the city of Evanston. because they don't keep anybody from breaking into anything, and all they do is present a horrible image. And I'm really tired of looking at them.
So that's a reference, you get that, Mr. Griffin?
AMPW.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, it has been moved in second, and I think we all voted, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on. P2, ordinance 890111, granting major variances for the construction of a multi-dwelling located at 2300 Green Bay Road in the R5 General Residential District. The Zoning Board of Appeals, ZBA, Site Plan and Review Committee, and staff recommends the adoption of Ordinance 89-0-11 that grants zoning relief at 2300 Green Bay Road to allow the construction of a 12 residential unit where the zoning code allows a maximum of 9 units, and to permit 15 on-site parking spaces where the zoning code requires 18 off-street parking spaces. Could we have a motion?
Move approval.
Okay, now we have, I believe we have a short presentation. Do we know who's doing that? Okay, you want to, either Mike, either one is okay. This is, this would be Ward 7, I believe. This is Alderman Grover. I think she's here.
Yes, hi, members of the committee. My name is Mike Rourke. I represent ownership for the property at 2500 Green Bay Road. And Site Plan and Review Committee approved the requested variances with the suggestion to have a possible car-sharing vehicle on site to accommodate the variance. ZBA approved the increase in the number of dwelling units and made a further recommendation that the parking variance be accommodated, or the parking variance be
Decrease.
thank you, by the owner finding 3 off-street, off-site spaces. As is written in the report, staff does not concur with that, and they feel that the 15 on-site spaces are sufficient, and we would like to concur with staff that the 15 would be sufficient. This is a transit-oriented development located on Green Bay Road, right across from the Central Street train station. Service Green Bay Road, serviced by the Pace bus transport, and CTA transportation located not too far away. The 15 parking spaces would provide for a ratio of 1.25 cars per one. And again, it's our feeling, and we do concur with staff, that the 125 is sufficient, and we would request that the ordinance as written be amended such that I believe it's Section 4, paragraph B, be stricken from the ordinance. That paragraph requires that the 3 off-site parking spaces be provided. Would you like me to stay for questions?
You're objecting to the 3 off-street parking spaces?
That is correct, yes.
Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, can you tell us what the average size of the units is now and what it was before? I'm looking to see if that's anywhere in the materials that we have.
Okay. What was, I'll give you a little history on the site. The property's been vacant since 2007. What was approved back, I think, in 05 or 06 was a plan for 8 units on the site by right. It allows for 9, but 8 were approved. Those 8 units were roughly 1,800 square feet, 1,850 square feet, and the project, the development was all going to be for sale condos.
Right, I remember.
The development stopped. The developer gave back the project. We purchased the project back in November of 2010, and right now, as proposed, the units would be anywhere from the 1-bedroom, I believe, is about 850 square feet. The 2 bedrooms are around 1,150 square feet average, and the 3 bedrooms are about 1,450 square feet. So we're staying within the building footprint and envelope. It's been partially completed, again, sitting partially completed and vacant for about 4 years. We're keeping the same height, same square footage, same footprint, just reconfiguring the floor plates.
How many 3-bedroom units will you have?
We will have 4 3-bedrooms, 1 per floor.
Okay, and so can you give me a breakdown? I'm looking at the page because I'm trying to understand how the type and size of the units that you'll have, and so what your parking requirements are going to be. Like, for instance, how many 1-bedrooms will you have?
We have 1 1-bedroom.
Okay.
And I misspoke. I believe the architect is here. I believe we have 8 2-bedrooms and 3 3-bedrooms.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? 3 3-bedrooms, 1 1-bedroom.
And 8 2-bedrooms.
8 2-bedrooms. If you had to find, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, continue. If you had to locate the 3 off-site parking spaces, where would they be available in that area? Is there a city lot? I don't know that area, Alderman Grover. Could
I am
permits?
I am not aware of a city lot. I mean, I know there's train parking east of Green Bay Road there, and I believe there are a couple private lots that are up and down Central. Again, given the fact that this is a transit-oriented development right across the street from the Metro on Green Bay Road, with the CTA not too far away, it's been, our history in looking at this, that the 1.25 ratio to 1 is sufficient for a project such as this.
What?
Alderman Nguyen, it's right across, just a little bit north of Haven.
No,
so
I
there's
know
no
where it
parking
is.
on Lincoln, and then you'd have to go all the way over to East Prairie, I believe,
Right.
before you could find off-street parking. You want to go
May
ahead?
I
and
ask
then
one more question?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry if this is in the materials and I missed it, but what do you anticipate renting the 3 different types of units for?
The 1-bedroom would be $1,300 to $1,500. The 2 bedrooms would be $1,900 to $2,100, and the 3-bedroom would be about $2,400 to $2,500.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Rainey?
Well, this is another one of those events that we should be grateful for. Here we have a foundation with no building. Along comes a developer who's, once again, is going to save the day. We've had a lot of these good experiences lately, and hopefully they'll keep up. It's a 15-unit building across the street from a train station. One segment of our staff says 15 on-site parking spaces is okay. The requirement, if you go according to the code, is 18 off-street space. I mean, I don't see where the argument is. I don't see that we can pick this apart. But before we continue picking it apart, could we hear from the alderman of the ward and hear what her position is? I, for one, am not really familiar with the parking situation in that neighborhood.
And I'm sorry if I may address, because we've had some back and forth on our plans. The breakdown is actually 7 2-bedrooms, 4 3-bedrooms, and 1 1-bedroom.
Thank you.
I apologize.
Alderman Grover?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pulling it up right here. As with the project on Central Street at 1700, I'm getting comfortable with the increased density and 1-to-1 or 1 to 1.25 ratios between parking units and residential units. This project is a little more difficult with off-street parking because of its location, and there really isn't obviously any parking on Green Bay Road or on Lincoln within a block or so of the project. There's parking, commercial parking at Central and Green Bay at the bank there, and I don't think that there's much parking on Prairie Avenue because of all the on-street parking of residents. So I don't know if there's any available on-street parking to satisfy the Zoning Board of Appeals 3 off-street parking requirement to make this happen.
But you are doing a car-sharing vehicle, is that right?
Well, that was suggested, and we're open to that, yes. The ZBA actually suggested that one spot that we would designate for car sharing would be better served towards one of the occupants of the building.
Have you talked to Zipcar or?
We have, yes, Yes, we Spark actually suggested that. We reached out and learned, I've never done it, learned about the program, and again, we would be open to something like that for the development.
Alderman Wilson?
Personally, I agree with Alderman Rainey. I'm comfortable with the 15 spots. If the tenant demand, I guess, supports the car sharing, that would make some sense to entertain that. I don't know that it would make sense for us at this point to make it a requirement. So I'm okay with the 15 if the rest of the group is.
If there's a way to decouple the rental units from the rental parking spaces so that if someone moves in, they don't have a car, it frees up available parking associated with this building, so that you rent the parking separately from the residential units. And then if there's a way to ensure that the residents of this building aren't issued residential parking permit passes to park in the neighborhood, I think the residents of this building will self-select themselves to this location based upon the availability of public transportation. I can't tell you how many buses pass by this lot every day. It's a half a mile from the L station. It's at the Lincoln entrance to the metro station. So it's really primed for exactly the kind of development that we want people there for who are not bringing lots of cars to the neighborhood, different from our single-family residential neighbors.
Any more comments? Okay, it's been moved in second. We have to consider.
Did we amend?
We have to consider his recommendation in terms of amending Section 4, I believe it is, number B. Is that correct?
Correct.
So just eliminate that.
We just eliminate it, right? To remove Section B.
Right, so I move to remove Section 4, subsection B regarding the parking lease.
Second.
Just Section B, though, not the...
Right, just
Okay.
so just subsection B.
No, I was just making sure I got it right here. That we would remove...
Require them to have the I-Go car or the share?
I don't think so. It's been moved that we, in Section 4, subsection B be removed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there,
Already seconded.
it's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, and it has been moved and second on the project. All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, P3, ordinance 88-0-11 regarding an application for special use of a bed and breakfast at 300 Church Street in the R1 Single Family Zoning District. On September 12, 2011, the City Council, in a 7-to-2 vote, rejected the recommendation of the Zoning Board of Appeal to deny a special use for a proposed bed and breakfast at 300 Church Street. Staff was directed to prepare an ordinance for consideration by the Planning and Development Committee and the City Council at a future meeting date. Proposed ordinance 88-0-11 has been prepared in response to this request. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved in second. I believe we also have a presentation. Okay, so. And I have one speaker. I only have one.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Andrew Scott. I'm with the law offices of Dykema Gossett, located at 10 South Wacker Drive, here on behalf of the applicant, Evergreen Manor, LLC. I'd like to request modifications of certain of the ordinances that was presented to you by staff. I'll go through them very quickly just to say where we're in concurrence with, but turning to Section 3 of the ordinance, the condition of 3A, compliance with applicable requirements, that's absolutely fine. In terms of Section 3B, we would ask that that section be stricken. The concern being that it essentially locks in Ms. Overend to being the perpetual operator of the property, and I would submit to the members of the committee that Colonel Pritzker is going to make quite a substantial investment in this property as the other owners of Evergreen Manor, and they are not going to allow the bed and breakfast to be operated by somebody other than who is a top quality operator of bed and breakfasts. In terms of Section 3, no basement in the kitchen, I believe when we were before the City Council a couple weeks ago, or I'm sorry, 30 days ago, we were absolutely fine with that restriction. In terms of 3D, the coach house occupancy restricted, we'd like to return the language of that to something that's more akin and with clarification to what is in your zoning ordinance, in that the coach house will not be used in conjunction with the operation of the bed and breakfast. And I know there was some discussion about what in conjunction with means, but we would like the opportunity to be able to rent out the coach house to somebody who's completely unrelated to the bed and breakfast and who is subject to a long-term lease at the coach house. And finally, with respect to off-street parking, we would ask that the number of required parking spaces be reduced from, the additional leased parking spaces be reduced from 2 to 1. I think we mentioned during our previous testimony that Colonel Pritzker, who lives immediately across the alley from the subject property, has already agreed to lease a space. In the interim, between the time of the Zoning Board of Appeals and the City Council meeting of 30 days ago, we did commission a parking study, and in fact, Louis Abuna from KLOA is here this evening, and if it pleases the chair, he can give his findings in terms of the availability, the extensive availability of parking in the surrounding area. And so if the committee would like to hear from Mr. Abuna, he's more than willing and able to testify, but otherwise that would summarize our requested changes to the proposed ordinance.
Is that Alderman Nguyen? Is that your light? Or
Yes, it is my light.
is it? Yes. Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, can you tell me if the coach house has been rented at any time?
Yes. It's been rented for many, many years. 50 years? And we could certainly give assurances. We're not going to rent it out to guests. That was never the intent.
Our ordinance requires a continuous rental of coach houses with no interruption. If there's been an interruption of a period of time when a coach house has not been rented, rental cannot be resumed.
And the tenant continues to occupy the property, so.
What?
Okay. Alderman Rainey?
Alderman Nguyen, are you saying that, for example, if the current tenant gives notice that at the end of their lease they're leaving, and the coach house is advertised, and another tenant, let's say, takes over the day after that tenant leaves, that's illegal? No. Oh, so you mean if it's vacant for some, oh, okay.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Do you know what that period of time is? I don't.
Listen, this coach house, I can't imagine would be vacant.
Oh, okay. It's a reasonable period. Right.
But this one is the subject
Yeah.
here, so,
But I would imagine it would have to be at least 30 days or more.
oh, I'm sure.
Okay.
It's longer than that.
Oh,
We'll,
okay, fine.
we'll, in our staff report coming back to you at vote, we'll
Okay.
include that.
That's fine.
I think it's 1 to 2 years, but I
Oh,
just don't.
okay. All right, fine.
But we probably should even take a look at that law. I mean, eliminating the possibility of decent housing just doesn't make any sense to me. But I don't really think that's the issue here. The issue that the coach house came up is fear that it would be used in association with the bed and breakfast, which we have, I'm sure we'll get even an affidavit that it will never be used for that. It's a rental property, and so, Madam Chairman, could I?
I have.
Could I finish?
Go ahead and finish, and then I have.
I agree with the condition having to do with the special use being connected to the current manager. I'm not familiar with special uses that we've considered over the past 20-some years being conditional upon an individual. Special uses frequently go with the land, but I'm not familiar with them going with an employee. So I think that, well, a partner. I don't see how we can do that. I would think any qualified manager, and there probably are even managers more qualified than the one that we're dealing with. You don't know that. I mean, so to say that only this person can be the manager of this bed and breakfast is really, I don't understand how we can say that. So I would move to eliminate that, and just, it would be like saying that the manager of a McDonald's that we give a special use to the special use only goes with that manager. That doesn't make any sense. There's a sense of fear about this fabulous project that I still don't understand. So I would move to eliminate the requirement that this individual, who's the current manager and part owner, that requirement be eliminated.
That's second.
It's been moved and seconded. Okay. Alderman Fisk, I have your light.
Thank you. Yeah, the problem is that this is not a McDonald's, and it's not in a commercial zone. It's what's becoming more and more clear all the time is that this is a commercial use in a residential zone. And if you read through the ZBA transcript or listened to ZBA, that was their concern, is that we have a 98% owner who is not living on site, and we have a 1% owner who is going to be living on site. So their concern was that 1% owner under an LLC can change. It can change at any time. And in order to keep a sense of continuity with our zoning ordinance, and the testimony from a lot of people who said this is not at all what a B&B was intended to be in our zoning ordinance. The reference by Alderman Nguyen to the Plan Commission to better define a bed and breakfast in a residential zone. This is taken on the appearance of a commercial guest hotel, and those are not allowed in R1 zones. And that's where ZBA was having the problem, is that this is morphing into something that was never intended. Now, the Overend sisters are lovely people. They're going to do a wonderful job. Colonel Pritzker is going to do a magnificent job in the House. There's no question about that. But what happens when one of the Overend sisters leaves? What happens when somebody else comes on as a 1% owner? These things can change all the time at the will of the 98% owner. This is simply, I think we're bending over backwards here to try to accommodate what's going to be a wonderful renovation of this house. But the structure and the business plan is really troubling. And it's troubling to the neighborhood. It's troubling to those of us who are trying to make sense of where this peg fits in our zoning ordinance. And that's why ZBA correctly identified these particular areas that they saw as the problem areas. And I don't think it's too much to say, and certainly if Ms. Overend were to leave, Colonel Pritzker could certainly come back to us and say, we'd like approval for the next person, whoever that is. But to leave it up in the air that this could be any 1% owner could take over the operation of this house, I think is really not acceptable. And I think it's troubling. And I think the larger discussion that needs to go on at the Plan Commission is this really the kind of development that we want in R1 neighborhoods? And maybe it is. But for right now, it isn't. It's not the fit that our zoning ordinance anticipates for this R1 neighborhood. Now, if I can say one other thing about the parking, if we're going to, and I agree that the long lease in the coach house is probably fine as long as that does not impact the operation of the house as a bed and breakfast. But that does mean that one more parking space is lost with a tenant in that coach house. So to further reduce the number of parking spaces that we're asking for, I think we actually should be increasing them by one if we're going to allow the tenant in the coach house.
Alderman, may I just, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Just want to have other lights.
My apologies.
Wilson?
I think Alderman Nguyen might have had hers on first, if that makes a difference.
No,
All right,
no,
okay.
I had you first, and then
Okay.
I got Alderman Rainey, and then I have Alderman Nguyen.
Thank you. A couple factors here. Of course, the 98% owner lives essentially next door to the property, so I think that that has a lot of sway in my mind as far as the operation goes, and eliminating the operator restriction, or at least changing it such that the 98% owner, has to live by the property, something along those lines. But I don't think it's reasonable, given the amount of the investment that's contemplated, to limit the operation to the one single human being. Things could happen, things could change in her life, things could happen, and it's not fair to the developer of the property to make that kind of investment and to tie his hands quite so tightly. With regard to the coach house, I do think that the language should be adjusted a little bit to make it clear. In my mind, it wasn't my personal intention to prevent what we'll call a traditional tenant from being in the coach house. So I think if we could adjust that language, if there's no other objection, to make it clear that a quote-unquote traditional tenant would be able to live in the coach house, and I understand there's one there and she could remain, that would be helpful for the use of the ordinance on an ongoing basis.
Alderman Rainey?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay, Alderman Nguyen.
I actually had a question for the attorney.
Oh.
With respect to subsection B, can you say again what it is that you would like to have done for altered with subsection B, operator restricted?
I'd like subsection B stricken in terms of the operator requirement, yes.
So you want to have no owner-operator living
No.
at the site?
No, we would have to comply with the zoning ordinance, and it would have to be owner-occupied. But I don't want owner-occupied restricted to Ms. Overend.
Okay, so what you'd like to have is just have it be
Owner-occupied.
You would like to have it owner occupied, but you want the reference to Ms. Overland removed.
Correct.
Okay.
The condition should be, just as it says in your ordinance, the bed and breakfast at all times shall be owner occupied.
Is that, Alderman Nguyen, is that?
Alderman Nguyen,
Yeah.
could I just make a suggestion?
Yeah.
That
I'm
that-
sorry, I was reading through it.
I
That's
know.
what I was doing.
That be, if that should occur, that it simply be presented to the council for our information and comment, so that we would know if a new owner occupant took over. I mean,
I would
you know,
accept that. No, I
have a
no,
lot of
I would.
respect for all of us, but I don't know who here is qualified to determine whether or not somebody's qualified to run a bed
No,
and breakfast.
but I wasn't finished. No, I wasn't. I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were saying. No, I think that there is an importance to having an owner occupied. I mean, that was, and I think the problem that we're experiencing here is that traditionally with special uses, I mean, Alderman Rainey is correct. Until about 8 or 9 years ago, special uses did traditionally run with the land. And then we began to realize the problems that presented to us in granting a number of special uses. And so then we limited them to the applicants that we granted the special uses to. So because we didn't feel comfortable simply allowing them to be granted to run with the land. So that's what we have done for the most part since then. So, and that's why here what we're trying to do is fit a traditional definition of limiting this special use to the applicant, whereas the applicant here is an LLC, and an LLC does not work very well with the way we have been limiting our special uses. So I don't have a problem with removing this and having and following Alderman Rainey's suggestion, but I did want to clarify that that's why we have changed is that we don't have special uses run with the land because we want to have control over what happens to the property. But I think that this is all arising, as Alderman Fisk has said, because this is not what we think of as a regular B&B, and that's why I made my reference.
Alderman Wilson, is that you again or no? No, okay, Alderman Fisk?
Then my suggestion would be that that this special use run with Colonel Pritzker's ownership of the property. Pardon me? Yeah. 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 And
I'm sorry, could you,
ownership of the property.
so Colonel Pritzker would have to have an ownership interest in the property at all times? That would be the condition?
Mm-hmm.
Would it be acceptable to put a period of time on that?
No. We don't do that for other special uses that run with the ownership of the business.
And so because I run into this sometimes, if Colonel Pritzker were, if he were to become incapacitated or if he were to expire, what would it devolve to as a state? I know it's I'm just trying to project out so I understand how it would work. So would you lose the special use if he were to die?
It just can't, the special use can't be tied to the LLC. It needs to be tied to the individual. The LLC, again, can just...
There's a substitution of use provision in our zoning ordinance. So under the substitution of use provision, the zoning director then has the ability to make a decision as to whether the new use or the new operator is enough of an identical user. So I think under those circumstances, I can't think of an instance where we've had that happen, but.
But a use versus a use.
Well, an applicant, for instance, if for instance when we've limited it to the applicant and therefore the use, well, ask Grant. He's making a face at me.
Grant.
Right.
Alderman Wynn, members of the committee, I'd have to look into that, but we'll be ready next go around. But I obviously our zoning code is not the most user friendly on the fly, so I would want to certainly vet that so that all the correct answers are provided to the committee for its consideration.
Yes, it is. The provision that we're talking about is operator restricted. The question is why limit it to Kathy Overend? So the argument that I thought prevailed was any owner-occupant, if there's any change in the owner-occupant, that needs to be brought to the council or to the committee or to the zoning board, of whoever you want it to go to confirm that an owner-occupant is taking the place of the last owner-operator occupant. We're getting into Pritzker. That's not who we're talking about here. We're talking about who is actually in the property, operating the property. And I think if we go beyond that, I mean, let's say Colonel Pritzker didn't have the, extraordinary funds that we all suspect he has. I have no idea. But this could very well hinder any effort at construction loans, et cetera, if, it's limited to his tenure, to his owning, to his being alive even. I mean, I don't know how old he is now, but I think that's an unreasonable restriction. The restriction ought to be that an owner-occupant needs to operate the property, the business, and that when that changes, that we are notified for comment and approval. When it changes, if it changes.
That changes, yeah. I think that's a good idea.
And I don't see that we should go any farther than that.
Alderman Risk.
I'm just going to ask for an amendment that this special use be tied to Colonel Pritzker's ownership of this particular property, given the extraordinary type of ownership that we're being asked to accept here, which is Colonel Pritzker, the 98% owner, is not going to live in this property. He's not going to live in the property. A 1% owner, which may change at any time, is going to be the owner, quote, owner-occupant operator of this property. And I think to have control over this in an R1 zone, we're not talking about a child care center on Davis Street or a fast food restaurant somewhere else. This is in a single-family residential neighborhood, and I just think we need to have the control over that. We've come so far. We've already denied ZBA's recommendations, and we've bent over backwards to try to accommodate Colonel Pritzker and his business partners in this. And I don't think it's too much to ask that we do what we've done in other situations where we have special uses tied to the owner, that we make this contingent on Colonel Pritzker's ownership of this property. I think to do otherwise is really taking a leap of faith and a risk that is simply not a good idea.
All right,
Yes,
you said that's a motion.
Yeah, I'm making an amendment.
And it's been moved in second. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, I thought we had another motion on the floor, but maybe I'm wrong. I was trying to keep up with it. Do we have another motion on the floor, Bobby? Do you remember?
The last one, let's vote on the last one.
Well, we'll vote on the last one first.
Madam Chairman, I believe there were at least two different motions.
That's
the
right.
one was the original by Alderman Wilson relative to and Rainey restricting the ownership. And then I believe Alderman Fisk has her amendment to that motion, and I'm not so sure if that could be technically considered a friendly amendment, since that's
Hostile amendment.
well, I'm just trying to keep the motions
Right.
on the floor clear here.
Go one more up before
Yeah,
that.
we can keep them separate.
And then there was another motion
There was the original motion to approve the ordinance, and then I came up.
Approve.
That's a let, yeah.
Yes.
That's why I
So,
voted that one. I know that.
so maybe I would suggest that we go with Alderman Rainey / Wilson's original motion, then we see where we go from there.
And also the one on the coach house. An amendment on the coach house.
So there's four motions.
I got that. I remember that we have to go back and do that because we're going to, because I thought we voted on that.
Generally.
Didn't we?
Yeah.
Oh, we have consensus on that one. I thought that one was okay. Bobby, did we? We did not vote on it. Well, let's do the easy piece first. Let's vote on that one because I think that we do have a consensus on that one in terms of the coach house being able to be continued to be rented. I think, is that the gist of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And it's been moved in second. That much I do know. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, the next one is to have the bread and breakfast ownership. If there's change in the, I'm sorry?
Have subsection be eliminated, that was it.
Well, no, it's not to be eliminated because they still want it to be owner occupied, but it's to be, the name of the individual is to be eliminated. Is that correct?
Didn't you want
That's
to be
what
a-
the motion is.
Change
And
would
when the
come to
change
council.
would, if there is, when and if there's a change, that the city be notified. That was, I believe, Alderman Rainey's motion. And I believe Alderman Wilson seconded.
Right.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
So is that 2? Is that 3 and 2? Okay, so 3 and 2 on that. Now, then we go back now to the original ordinance. Is that correct, Mr. Farrar?
We
No,
have
we go to the.
Alderman
That's up
Fisk's
To the
I'm
amendment.
sorry,
Fisk has a
Alderman Fisk.
motion.
Motion.
And could you, I guess, I'm not clear on understanding what your suggestion.
The purpose of this is that, at least for special uses in the first ward, since I've been on the council, I've been very consistent that special uses should be tied to the ownership of the business, not allowed to run with the land. And so this is nothing different than what I've done in other cases, and that is ask for this to be tied to Colonel Pritzker. So Colonel Pritzker's ownership of this property, considering the fact that he's a 98% owner of, a 98% partner of the LLC, that this be tied to his ownership of the house.
Okay. And Alderman, when you second that?
Seconded that.
Okay, but Alderman Wilson, you wanted to comment?
I did. What if we did something along the lines of tying it to the ownership, however, if he divests himself of his ownership for any reason, the lawyer can write the language, that the existing operator could continue to operate the B&B. So in other words, say he sold it to somebody, but Ms. Overend was going to continue to operate
But we
it.
just removed Ms. Overend.
No, we didn't. We didn't.
Okay.
We haven't locked her in. She's no longer an indentured servant to the house. But the existing operator, assuming there's whoever it happens to be at the time, he divests himself of the interest of the house,
Okay.
would be able to continue to operate it as long as he or she is an owner.
And she would be named.
They would notify.
Well, we'd have to be notified, right? We'd have to
They
know
have to
who's
be
operating.
notified, not
Right.
named.
Right.
Well, wait a minute. You're saying Ms. Overend, and you're saying she...
Well, okay, hypothetically, she decides to move to Florida, and Ms. Overend decides to move to Florida, and Mr. Colonel Pritzker still owns the property, and he hires Melissa, and she's operating the B&B. He decides to sell it to Grant. So Grant buys it, he owns it, Melissa's operating it. Melissa would be able to continue to operate it because she notified us she's been doing a good job and we're okay with how she's been doing it until such time as she decides to stop operating it. So in other words, he can sell it, do something with it, but the current operator,
Violates this provision.
because you own part of it. You got that 1% from Ms. Overend.
I never heard that.
Yeah, you
Okay.
didn't say that. So-
I left that
so
part
Melissa
out.
now owns
Melissa
1%.
owned that 1%, yeah. She bought that 1%. She took Ms.
Well, it
Overend.
have to be, because it has to be owner occupied.
Right, right,
Yeah.
You
right.
left that part out. I
Yeah.
was just going to be the.
She was going to be the employee.
I'd get a C on that exam question.
You've got to retake the bar.
Take this
Do you understand what I just said?
Take this time and call your mother.
I got it.
Runs with Colonel Pritzker, and if he divests himself of his interest in the property for any reason, that the current operator would be able to continue to operate it, provided they had an ownership interest in the.
Got it. And I would just ask if council is, I just want to know if council understands that and is amenable to that. I would want it to make, I would want it to track with council before we brought it back, if the, assuming the amendment is approved, just so that there's no confusion in the language.
I think put most simply, if I understand it correctly, the special use permit would run for the longer of Colonel Pritzker having an ownership interest in the property, or the operator at such time of the property that the operator of the B&B at such time Colonel Pritzker divests himself of his interest in the property.
Correct. How do I get a B plus?
I have Alderman Rainey.
Well, I want to know how that comports with Alderman Fisk's requirement that once Colonel Pritzker was no longer the owner, this would no longer be a bed and breakfast.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
It adjusts that a little bit. So if somebody was operating it and doing a good job who had an ownership interest, they wouldn't get kicked out just because he decided
But
to.
I think we'd moved on from the 1% owner occupant to the big guy. That's what I thought
It's a
she
hybrid.
was trying to
It's a
do.
hybrid.
It's a hybrid. It's a hopefully a fair hybrid.
Right.
Well, I can't wait to see the
language.
final language.
It'll be fine.
That's Grant's
You know,
problem.
I
Grant
see,
said it in AM.
That's right.
I see other lights, but I think I've called on everyone. Anybody else have any more comments? Okay. That's it?
So I've moved to amend Alderman Fisk's motion.
The only name I have on here is Mr. Scott, and I assumed he's done what he wanted to do.
Did we address parking?
It's Mr. Scott.
Oh, we did address, oh, you're right.
Okay, we have to do the parking. Sorry.
And Alderman Fisk, to your point, we've said we will dedicate the 3 parking spaces in the coach house to users of the bed and breakfast. So the coach house tenant will not have a space up there.
Right, the coach house tenant is permitted space on the
Right.
street.
Right.
Okay, parking,
No, we first need to vote on Alderman Fisk's motion as amended by Alderman Wilson.
oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Let's restate it. I'm sorry, I'm not voting on something I.
Okay.
So
I'm going to have to ask either Grant or Don to restate it, because I can't.
generally speaking, that the special use would run with the ownership of Mr. Pritzker unless, let's see, it would run with the ownership of Colonel Pritzker, but in the event that Colonel Pritzker were to divest himself of his interest, the current operator at the time of such divestiture,
Owner operator.
provided that that operator is at least a part owner of the entity, could continue to operate the B&B as long as they're an owner and operator.
With notification to the city.
With notification to the city.
Right, and any times the operator is changed, that the city would have to be notified. Any time that the owner during Colonel Pritzker's tenure, operator during Colonel Pritzker's tenure changes, we have to be notified.
You got it. So in effect, as long as there's an owner and an owner-operator, occupant owner, then nothing changes.
Nothing changes.
Right.
I understand.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Oh,
Aye.
aye.
Okay. Now, parking. I'm sorry, I can't remember. He wanted to eliminate one, right.
I'm
move
sorry,
the elimination.
Madam Chairman, he wanted to eliminate one of the two conditioned parking spots.
I move that subsection E be reduced from 2 parking spaces to 1 parking space.
Second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Alderman Fisk.
So you would still be valeting guests to the city parking garage? I'm sorry, in the case of special events, you would still be doing that. We're talking about just the people who have rented rooms in the B&B.
Yeah, if there's a need to valet people for events, or even if there's a need to valet a guest, we're more than happy to do that.
Okay.
We want it to be a good experience.
Okay. I don't want the neighborhood filling up with cars for special events, even though people from CLOA think there's no one parking in the neighborhood. Okay? Okay.
Okay, any other questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Now, I was just, okay, so now in the project, that's our final vote for ordinance 88-0-11B, approved as amended. And I think I have subsection 3, B, D, and E as amended, okay? It's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. That completes
Thank you
our
very much.
agenda, and city council should follow immediately.